All right, well, as everybody knows, the clock is ticking. And if this fight with Wilder can't be made with Joshua, then as everybody knows, and it's been reported that Joshua's going to take his next option, and that's going to be his mandatory against Alexander Povetkin. And let's talk about this fight because a lot of people think that this fight is going to be a cakewalk for Anthony Joshua, and then he's going to have an easy time against Alexander Povetkin. And I totally disagree with that because Alexander Povetkin definitely can punch. He's a very skilled fighter. He's an excellent inside fighter. He's a tough, rugged, durable guy. He's got a great amateur background, very well rounded. And you look at his fight with Carlos Takam, and Takam's a guy who arguably beat Joseph Parker. Some people think that Takam won that fight. It was a very close, competitive fight, and a lot of people think that Takam may have pulled that one out. And also, Anthony Joshua did not look great against Carlos Takam. He had a very controversial ending to that fight. A lot of people thought it was stopped too early. A lot of people actually thought that Anthony Joshua got hit a little bit more than he should have and got hit with a lot of clean right hands that he should have been able to get away from and block. But Alexander Povetkin, had a little bit of trouble with Takam in spots, but at least you could say he had a very clean ending. His fight with Takam had a clear stoppage. It was an emphatic stoppage, and there was no questions at the end of that fight. Takam was thoroughly beaten at the end of that fight. He was knocked out. Okay? It was a clean stoppage. So let's take a look at this matchup and see how Povetkin can win this fight. And let's look at some of the weaknesses and strengths of both guys. Okay, so Povetkin definitely is not the greatest outside fighter. He's a shorter heavyweight. So if he's going to fight against a Klitschko type guy, a guy who has arguably one of the best jabs in boxing and all of heavyweight boxing, I'm talking about historically, you could say arguably that he has one of the best jabs of all time in this heavyweight division. And we've seen him control fights with that jab and be able to really set up that right hand perfectly behind it because, people would criticize Klitschko for being maybe a simplistic 1-2 basic fighter. But the thing is he always kept you guessing with that jab. He always kept up changing the rhythm of that jab, using it in many different ways. Sometimes he would just par it out there and lull you into a false sense of security if you're an opponent. And then out of nowhere, he'd just be like, boom, land a power jab that had the effect of a right hand. It was a very dangerous punch, and he was consistent with it, and he used it. And for the most part, it was a great weapon in his arsenal and helped him become the fighter that he was. And that was a determining factor in the fight with Povetkin, Povetkin's fight with Klitschko. Big difference here is Anthony Joshua is a taller guy, same size pretty much as Klitschko, same height, about same weight, same reach. But the difference is Anthony Joshua doesn't always use his height properly, doesn't gauge distance properly, and can be a little bit lazy with his jab. And sometimes he doesn't throw it enough. And Anthony Joshua seems to be more comfortable fighting in the mid-range as opposed to fighting inside or outside. He likes to throw those mid-range, uppercuts and hooks in the mid-range area of the pocket. And a lot of times, when he's fighting shorter guys, it seems as though sometimes they smother him and he really can't get the proper distance and get the proper leverage on his shots. Because we've seen in his fight against Carlos Takam, he had a hard time landing cleanly. Even in Joseph Parker, another shorter, stockier guy, although he does move a lot more than Takam, but Takam moves well too. But you saw that he had a hard time landing cleanly against the shorter guys, shorter, stockier guys. And he had a hard time gauging the proper range and distance, and he really couldn't turn his shots over properly and land his shots as flush as he normally does against taller guys. So I think that style-wise, this is a tough fight for Anthony Joshua because of his inconsistencies with his jab, and also too he's going to be punching down, and when he throws his right hand, sometimes he steps in and leans in, really hard with that right hand, and he's going to be punching down at the same time, and Alexander Povetkin will have the opportunity to land that vaunted left hook that he has right over the top of that right hand when Anthony Joshua leans forward and punches down. So another difference too is Anthony Joshua doesn't really fight always a defensively responsible fight. Sometimes he gets a little anxious, like I said, leans in with power shots, loads up with shots, whereas Vladimir Klitschko was more of a safety first guy, more of a patient guy. So when he fought Povetkin, he slowed the pace of the fight down. When Povetkin got close, he grabbed and held and tried to control the action. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, a lot of times he tries to fight his way out of those similar situations where Vladimir Klitschko will slow the pace of the fight down. So in this fight, I think Povetkin will have a lot more offensive opportunities. And I just think this is a tough fight for Anthony Joshua. And if this fight ends up going to purse bids, if this fight is going to be the next fight, it's very possible that Povetkin's promoter, Andre Ryabitsky, can win this purse bid if it goes to purse bids. And this fight can be in Russia. And that'll spell even more trouble for Joshua because he won't have that comfort zone of being in the UK. And some people have questioned whether or not he gets favorable treatment in the UK from the judges and from the referees. Well, all that will go out the window if this fight ends up being in Russia. And here's another thing, too. He's not in the same situation as he is with a Wilder fight where he can just walk away from the negotiations. If they can't agree to terms in this fight and it goes to purse bids and Team Joshua still doesn't like the deal, if they decide to walk away from the fight, they're going to have to vacate the title. And that's one less belt that he'll have to bring into negotiations with a fight with Deontay Wilder. So now he won't be able to say, oh, well, I have 4 belts and you only have 1. He'll be missing a belt, and he'll lose a little bit of leverage. Whether or not it's a lot or whether or not it matters to him, that's another thing altogether. But at the end of the day, I don't think that this is necessarily a better option for him. And the way that it's being talked about as if this is going to be an easy fight, that he has no chance of losing this fight, that this is a safer fight for him than Deontay Wilder fight, totally disagree with that because of all those things I just mentioned. And I'll tell you this, if this fight is in Russia and Povetkin's like a 3 or 4 to 1 underdog, I'll tell you this, I would not be against making a value play on Povetkin. I don't think it's such a bad bet to pick Povetkin for the upset there. I think it's a nice value play. And I think Povetkin does have a shot in this fight because, again, styles make fights. And Joshua is not a safety-first fighter. Joshua is not consistent with his jab. Joshua is not a great inside fighter, as shown in the Takam fight. And also, Joshua fades late. So in a fight where it could be a rough and tumble grinder type affair, where you got a guy in your face, in your chest, trying to grind away at you on the inside, and you're not going to hold the guy because that's not your style. That's not how you fight. And you're going to try and fight this guy off you for 12 rounds. That's going to take its toll on you later in the fight. And, Povetkin could have some work already in the bank. He could have already made some investments to the body at that point. And he could have Joshua in a worn down state. So that's the thing here. Povetkin's never been stopped. Povetkin is a durable guy. Povetkin is a hard puncher. And Povetkin's only loss was to a prime Vladimir Klitschko, who arguably has one of the best jabs in heavyweight boxing history. And that was, again, I said that was a key determining factor in him winning that fight. And also the fact that he grabs and holds and is hard to slow the fight down. He's more craftier than Anthony Joshua is. And arguably people think that he was winning his fight against Anthony Joshua before he was stopped in the 11th round. So who's to say that if he didn't make, I know we play the game of woulda, coulda, shoulda, but who's to say that if he didn't make some tactical errors later in that fight, that he couldn't possibly be the victor in that fight. So again, this is not an easy fight for Joshua. I think he has a great, I think Povetkin has a great chance of winning this fight. And I think that this may not be the better move going in this direction. Because again, this is a fight which is a mandatory, and some of the leverage that you have against Deontay Wilder, you may not have in this fight, because this fight has to happen. Okay, so what about the drug testing? How's that going to be dictated in this fight? Because Povetkin failed 2 PED tests. Again, I don't want to, put the black cloud over this fight already, and I don't want to cast dispersions on this fight. But again, that's something to think about. So how is the drug testing going to be for this fight? And if Povetkin doesn't agree to the drug testing that Team Joshua wants, again, the fight goes to purse bids and they can't agree on a deal, then Joshua decides to walk away from this fight. He's out of the WBA title, and then Povetkin can fight the next available contender, the number 2 guy, for the vacant WBA title. So I don't think, Povetkin's team and Ryabinski would be against that happening. They wouldn't, if they had to get the title that way, that's a piece of the title. That gives your fighter power in the division. He has a stronger position in the division. Obviously, the Joshua payday would be nice, but there's other fights out there for Povetkin. If he's going to be the title holder, he can hold that hostage in Russia if he wanted to, and he can make some money as the WBA champion with or without Joshua. So, guys, let me know what you think. Does Povetkin have a shot here? I think he does. Give me your opinion. Let me know. Till next time, Beaver's out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.